OC World is made possible by the generous contributions of the Marisla Foundation, the Keith and Judy Swain Family Foundation, and viewers like you. Thank you. Personal stories make a difference in how we think, but most importantly, how we feel. The power of humanity sometimes gets underestimated, but a connection based on emotions reminds us that we are still capable of changing our beliefs. Dispelling myths about immigrants require not just the facts, but stories that illustrate the intellectual explanations. And to help us to do that is George Pla, founder and CEO of Cordoba Corporation, who was honored this year with a Spirit Award by the Latino Caucus for achievement in business and philanthropy. He is also an immigrant who fled to the United States with his family, as he says, in the cover of darkness. He went on to realize the ultimate American dream and wrote a book about the power shift of the Latino politics in the US. Thank you for joining us, George.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
It's so good to have you here in the studio. We've talked over the years about your life story. But just as there are with any story, let's start from the beginning. You came to the United States, as you say, in the cover of darkness. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, I mean, it's an American story. It's a typical immigrant story of families wanting to make a better life, wanting to secure safety and economic prosperity, if at all possible. So years ago, I won't mention how long, we came from Jerez, Zacatecas, right in the middle of Mexico, at a time that there was no hope to make a living there and needed to come to the United States, the land of opportunity, land of dreams, to secure family, to make a living, but also I think starting with my grandfather, the great patriarch, to also give back and make a difference in the world. That's always been in our DNA in our family, and hopefully that's something we've accomplished here in the United States.
As you were growing up, because you went through some hard times, did it feel like the land of dreams in the beginning?
No, I was a stranger in a strange land. Don't know the language, don't know the culture, don't know the customs, and foreign to me. But fortunately, in the great neighborhood of Boyle Heights, the Ellis Island of Los Angeles, where the community was Japanese, it was Jewish, Black, and Mexican, it felt like the United Nations. And we were able to assimilate, if you will, into everybody's culture, which I think is part of the American dream and the promise of what America represents.
Do you remember? I think we all remember that first, or maybe one of the significant moments when you actually felt racism. You grew up in a community that's very diverse, sounds like it was very integrated, but surely there was a point in life that you felt sort of the hurt of racism. Do you remember? When was that?
It was really, the real barrier was language, just not knowing. I remember I couldn't distinguish from gum and gun. I remember that when I look at the mountains, I thought it was ice cream. I didn't know it was snow. Just, stark differences that weren't familiar to you. And I remember a funny one, maybe racist, maybe not, that the little girls would have their lunch bags and their sandwiches all cut neatly. And I have this big brown bag with a giant burrito in it. And the girls would go, "Oh, what is that?" And so I remember that, oh, maybe it's different. Maybe I'm different. Maybe I eat different food. But you get over that quickly. You make those adjustments, and as kids, you come together rather quickly, as opposed to adults who don't adjust as well as they should.
So let's fast forward into your adult life. What was your dream? What did you want to become? And how did you go about pursuing that dream?
Well, I was very fortunate that I was a good athlete. There's a joke that says, pardon me, the older you get, the better you were. So I can now say I was a great athlete. That really helped me a lot. It helped me with my self-esteem. It helped me with my friends in school, made you popular. And so that was a big, big help. And so as a little kid, you're always going to be that professional athlete, right? But as time went on, you learn that you have to be competitive, you have to excel, you have to succeed above others. And I knew then that college had to be in the plans. While I have a master's degree, I'm most proud of my AA degree. That without the AA degree from East LA College, I was going nowhere. And that was a significant accomplishment to our goals that we had in our family.
Now, as you were growing up, the country, the state of California, was a different place for immigrants. And certainly you felt some of the hurdles and the challenges and seen a lot of those examples around you. What were some of the things that stood out to you that when you looked at it, you said, I think I want to make it better, or I think I want to change that? Because from there on, the body of your work, your labor of love and your profession, you do so much to advance people of color and give them opportunities. So I'm trying to understand for the viewers here, when did that shift for you personally happen?
It's very stark to me. It was 1968. There was riots in East LA, burning buildings. Dr. King had been assassinated. Robert Kennedy had been assassinated. I was at East LA College then, and it was a year of turmoil. Vietnam War was raging. The hippie movement had started, and is the world going to hell in a handbasket, or what? And I recall distinctly that the major that I chose was sociology. Making a difference, looking at society, what should and shouldn't be. And while I was watching the fires going on in East LA, I decided then that yes, the protests were appropriate, yes, we needed to protest the war, but then what would happen after that? What was the solution? What would you do to make it better after protests were all over the country? And I decided and determined then that we would do something about that we would be part of the solution. That it was about economic empowerment, it was about job creation, it was about public safety, it was about health. And that those of us coming out of school at that time, late 60s, early 70s, would be the generation that would fix these things. And we, not only I, have dedicated ourselves to making that a reality.
So tell us, who is we? When you say we, who's that?
I think you said it right. I think it's, first of all, you can start with people of color who have the motive and the need to make a change. But I think in this mosaic of the American society, it's not to the exclusion of everyone. It is the American dream. It does include everybody. Not everybody is racist or right-wing or partisan. There are people that want to make this better. The book Power Shift, documents that it is an American story by people of different ethnicities, Irish, Jewish, Italian, Asian, et cetera, the African Americans that have come together to make it a better world. I'm not naive to the problems that we have, but I'm also the optimist that there are solutions, that there are ways, and that people want to band together to make this a better place.
And in writing your book, well, let's go back a little bit. What made you decide to write a book about it?
I was very frustrated with the lack of good information, good data, good material on what immigrants, specifically Latinos, and their contributions to society. I thought it was fairly substandard and not enough. We sought out with my co-author, David Ayon, to document and write a story about the contributions that Latinos had made in society, not only in California, but across the nation, including healthcare, job creation, et cetera, in politics, policymakers in the public sector, the union movement, the media as well, and the impact that they could have, should have in society. I think Power Shift tells that story pretty well. We are working on a second book that will be on current issues with current people. It also frustrated me that young kids in school would be asked to write about their heroes, their role models. And it was still George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, maybe Dr. King, and not much else. Well, I think we have a lot of leaders and people that have made enormous contributions, public sector, private sector, from all communities, API and African American, Latino, and others. And we have to seek those out. We have to document that and have our young people know that there are folks that look like them that have made a contribution to society.
All right, well, we're going to take a short little break because when we come back, I want to talk a little about your thoughts and observation over the years on policies, particularly related to immigration, or maybe other policies that you've seen, and just sort of the politics in California today. So we'll be right back after a very short break. Please don't go away. Come back and join us as we continue this conversation.
Sandra Cisneros, novelist, poet, dreamer. Being the only girl crowded by 6 brothers and treated as a princess was something Sandra detested. The Mexican traditions and household chores imposed on her would prepare her for marriage and nothing else, but she saw life differently. She took refuge at the city library where she shared magical moments with her mother, surrounded by books. One day, something came over her, and she began to jot down her painful reality on paper. Through the power of words, Sandra found her voice and a literary star was born. She dedicated herself to highlighting the adversities and injustices experienced in Mexican-American culture. Her most recognized work is The House on Mango Street. Translated in over 20 languages, this masterpiece is now standard curriculum for schools and universities. So pick up a pen and paper now and let your imagination run wild. Only then can you build a sacred place for your dreams.
Of what we're celebrating here today, this journey that George and David have organized and advanced in a very deliberative way, that political leadership is about organizing at the local level. It's about civic activation. It's about voter registration. It's about capacity building. That's really the story about this power shift in the state of California that's led to this power shift that's being recognized and reconciled. And George, you have been an extraordinary part of that dream. And I just want to thank you for highlighting those that inspired you, enlivened you, but have inspired millions and millions of people, not only across the rest of this state, but that are inspiring people across the rest of the country. Thank you for this work.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining us. Today we're talking about a personal story of an immigrant. And I'm here today with George Pla. He is the CEO founder of Cordoba Corporation and also an author of Power Shift. And we're just talking about your journey and what made you decide to write the book. So tell us a little bit about the book itself for viewers.
The book features 10 individuals that made enormous contributions to society, California, United States. Let me give you some examples that are just extraordinary to me. Gloria Molina was a secretary and then one day decided that she's going to be a professional. she rises to be the first individual to the state legislature, county board of supervisors, opposing prisons that's going to be put into East LA. And why East LA? Opposing the fact that the largest number of freeways in California all happen to be in one neighborhood in East Los Angeles. Why is that? And that had to change. Richard Alatorre redistricted California in a way that would provide representation for all communities in the state of California. Computerized it, never been done before as well. He also found out that they were sterilizing prisoners of color unbeknownst to them and exposed that. Can you imagine that? Sterilizing people unbeknownst to them and exposed that. Gilbert Cedillo, the DREAM Act, the Driver Licensing Act that he passed in California, giving the right and dignity to people to drive their kids to school and to their jobs without fear. People that have lived here for 20, 30, 40 years. That legislation affected over 1 million people. He's now known as 1 Mil Gil. And Esteban Torres, congressman, there would never have been the NAFTA, the North American Trade Agreement between Mexico and the United States, were it not for Esteban Torres. Congressman Ed Roybal came up with the idea of the census and the category called Hispanic, which did not exist. Latinos were always lumped into the Anglo category. Well, what is the significance of that? The significance is that it affects federal funding for healthcare and housing and transportation. And Congressman Roybal did that. Maria Elena Durazo, now a state senator, fought for the hotel workers to get a decent wage and health care. Did not exist before, affecting millions of people in California. And then what's extraordinary is that these individuals all lived and worked within 2 miles of one another when they were growing up. What was going on in East Los Angeles there? But policies that affected, again, not only California, but the entire United States in the area of housing and healthcare and job creation as well. Do our kids know that? No, they don't. So this book is intended for our young people more than anything, from elementary school to the four-year colleges, universities, that they would know the rich history, that this members of a society had made this contribution. And that was the intent of Power Shift. Thankfully, it's gotten great coverage throughout the United States. It's been very successful. One day we hope that they will be in the curriculum in K through 12. Already today, the universities are teaching from that book, and which is why we've embarked on a second book that we'll talk about that at another time.
No, we'll talk about that today too, but just going back a little bit, these are not just people that you knew of. These are people you worked with. You are part of this story, and I want to understand a little bit about the role, but use the word Hispanic, and we hear Hispanic, Latinos, Latinx, Chicano movement. Just very briefly, how do you differentiate that for people who may not be as aware as what term goes with what?
I really think it's generational. I think there was a time when there was no designation whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And then the term Hispanic came up during the time of Ed Roybal and Richard Nixon, for that matter. At that time is when that came about. And then when the 60s came about in the civil rights movement and such, Chicano, came up as almost as in the same vein as Black Power, if you will. And it was call it a militant term to designate that Latinos, Chicanos had arrived. And then the movement became larger and Latino was more inclusive there. Today is Latinx, and the designation is to include everybody there. So it's just very generational. I think it started with good intent, and then it broadened from there. Those of us that are much older, we didn't even know what Latinx was.
You're not that old.
But I think that the bottom line is that the intent is to be more inclusive of everybody, not just one group versus another group.
And you've seen the generational changes. I know you're a very proud grandfather. And when you look at the role that you played as you talked about these great figures in the book, what was your role? How did you kind of come along with all these people that I know you now call as friends?
I was just very fortunate to be in school in the late 60s, early 70s, in a time of social upheaval and movement. And I said before, I was a sociology major, so I was disposed that way anyway. And I was fortunate to meet people like Richard Alatorre and Art Torres and Ed Roybal, leaders in the community at that time. And they included me as part of that group. Richard Alatorre is a great friend and mentor of mine. And they just got me involved, and I thought it was important. I thought it was fun. And I was just blessed to be a part of that movement that started in the early 70s until today. And it still goes on. It's not over yet. We're not there yet. We have a long ways to go.
Absolutely, that is very true. When you came out with this book, you had a big ceremony. I know you didn't intend it to be a ceremony, but just about who's who in politics was in that room. As you write your second book, what are you hoping to accomplish with the second book? Give us a little preview.
Well, first about the book signings that you mentioned. When you throw a party and you don't know who's going to show up? Well, every time we held a book signing, about 500 people would show up, not only in politics, but in the community and business, nonprofits. The turnout was just stunning to us, all over California, not just LA. And I think that was an expression of people being hungry for good information, being hungry for positive news, wanting to meet these individuals that had made such a contribution. It was amazing to have them all in the same room at the same time. Folks that were brothers and sisters, but also not always got along. So people were very interested in the dynamics of that. And then these principals in the book told their own personal stories at these book signings. So it was very, very successful and pleasantly surprised at that turnout. And so that story began with these 10 individuals about, say, 20, 30 years ago. But we have a lot going on today. We have a country that is, maybe torn apart, very partisan, a lot of issues going on in the country. And we're writing a book that's going to document current leaders of today, like the obvious one is Senator Alex Padilla, which is a story unto itself. Current leaders of today and their impact on society across the board to all communities. And I want to underscore something really important. Writing the book about Latinos is not to the exclusion of anyone else. This is an American story that includes everyone. These coalitions that have come together that you will see in the upcoming mayor's race, for example, Los Angeles, will be very important as we face these challenges. We're going to have to do it together. It's going to have to be a coalition. But that's really been the history of this wonderful country, that eventually and ultimately we will come together to solve the problems that are facing us. The second book, Powership, is going to document and tell the stories so that everyone can see what is possible.
So going back to your personal story, you are the founder of Cordoba Corporation. You talked earlier about how important it was for you create jobs, create opportunities. And as the founder of this growing and thriving business, you've been doing that. You live by that. So tell us a little bit about how you're doing it through the business that you created and the the extra efforts that you're making that hopefully that other organizations would try to emulate to, again, provide greater equity and access to jobs that fuel our economy?
Well, what's odd about Cordoba, and I mentioned several times today that I'm a sociology major, which I'm very proud of. I never started this enterprise for money. And it's unusual, right? If you're supposedly this business person, why else would you do that? Cordoba represents a vehicle that does empower people, that does create jobs. We're no stranger to the fact that it does make money, but to what end? And what we say at Cordoba is make a difference where you live and work. So when you look at Cordoba statewide, our 9 offices, our almost 600 employees, we look like the United Nations. We have everyone that represents California included in that, technical experts, engineers, project managers, architects, working in the area of infrastructure development, transportation, water, energy, schools. But see, it's not about bricks and mortar. It's about making a difference in the communities you work in by how you approach those projects, whether it's a freeway, whether it's high-speed rail, whether it's energy converting from gas to electricity. And the list goes on and on. But how do you see it and how do you go about it is what's different. And because money isn't the driver, then the behavior in the company is different and the impact in the communities is very different. And I think we're very blessed because we have that approach to our business.
Well, and clearly the impact that you've made is known. It was recently recognized. You were honored with the Latino Spirit Award. What did that feel like? I mean, you talked about coming here as a kid in the cover of darkness, and you go through all these events in life, and at this juncture, you still have a lot more to do and a lot more to go, but to get an award like that, that kind of a recognition, what did that mean to you?
I have to admit to you that I didn't at first understand the significance of it. I thought it was another event that I have to go to. But I have to tell you that when I went to the state capitol and I was in the legislature and I heard them reciting all these things that, we had done, it got to me. It had an impact on me. I got teary-eyed because it finally occurred to me that maybe we had done a few things right over the last 30 years. So it ended up to be very significant and very touching to me, and a reminder of why we're here, why we do this, and why we need to keep going.
Well, I had the great fortune of being there when you were honored, and there were so many admiration, but what really stood out to me was your humility. And I still see that, and you talked earlier about we have long ways to go. We absolutely do, and your stories, other stories, more stories, we hope to showcase this, to really show the power of the people. Like you said earlier, there's a lot going on in the world, but people can make a difference. We can create that opportunity and hope. So I thank you so much for joining us today, George, and I look forward to your next book. I look forward to more great work, and we'll be tracking you very closely.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed our conversation and it meant something to you. Again, we all have our personal narrative that really make up the social narrative to do good and make a positive impact. That's why we believe in hopeful journalism, bringing you facts, but with stories that give us that silver lining, that little bit of light that we all need to lift ourselves. So until our next program, we hope you stay safe and be well. Thank you.